So the informative speech genre is our first, I'd say, major speech example of that we're going to use for the course. We're going to do this assignment that is worth about 25% of the grade. That's to do an informative speech. So let's look at some of the hallmarks of the informing genre, the informative speech. So we're going to have several slides that contrast it with persuasive speech. So that's the kind of operative distinction to keep in mind. But what it is, rather than what it isn't, is, well, it's got inform in it. So you want to be able to inform your audience about something without being condescending or patronizing, of course. And this is kind of a difficult line to walk sometimes because you don't know exactly what your audience knows already necessarily. But regardless, you can think of the objective as, even if it's something your audience probably knows something about, you can help provide them with a new point of view on what that thing is, or expand the information that they have about a topic. So if we think of that as the goal, then we have to worry less about whether we're accidentally kind of informing our audience of something that they obviously already know in a way that then they might see as like condescending, whether you intend it that to be the case or not, obviously. So, but it's helpful to think of this in terms of the contrast with persuading. So you're not trying to change anyone's mind about anything necessarily in an informative speech. The considered easier part, the textbook says that don't think about it like that. It's easier in the sense that you're maybe likely to get less resistance from your audience. If you're not asking somebody to change their mind about something, then there's going to be less sort of built-in psychological resistance to what you're saying, potentially. People tend to not want to change their minds, is the assumption here, I think. And there's research that bears that out. And so the easier part really just means that you're going to kind of have a more willing, receptive audience, potentially, in an informative speech. We are talking about things that are, to as much of a degree possible, objective, that are being presented in informative speech. And so that's something to keep in mind, that if you find yourself sort of straying into territory where you realize, someone might dispute whether that's true or not, then you might be straying into persuasive territory rather than informative territory. And again, really the idea is imparting knowledge. Your audience should be able to say after hearing your speech, well, I know something that I didn't used to know after listening to that speech. So, there's a couple of examples of topics and how they'd sound in a persuasive speech versus an informative speech. So topic number one, autism, let's say, the condition called autism. Informative speech would simply be, trying to educate the audience on how the mind of a person with autism works. A persuasive speech, though, would be actually advocating for something about autism. So saying, for instance, people with autism have rights and they need protection. That's like trying to get your audience to agree with you about some particular stance on an issue. In this case, autism and disability accommodation. Of course, the informative version is just, here's how the mind of a person with autism works. And then number two, so with the topic that we could call something like, non-human animals, or the brains of the minds of non-human animals. Informative speech would simply be teaching you a little bit about how actually non-human animals, are kind of like us. They have complex neurological systems. They're sentient creatures, which means that they have self-consciousness. They know that they're alive and can reflect on their state of being. A persuasive speech on the same topic, however, would be something to the effect of non-human animals deserve legal protection against pain and suffering. So again, that's just trying to not just inform you of something, but convince you to take a particular position or adopt a particular stance about what we should do, given what we know about non-human animals and their brains. And so you can, as you see here, you can use an informative speech kind of topic, or you can use the substance from that to be the basis of a persuasive speech, but they are fundamentally different in their objectives and the way